Hi guys! So it's that time of year again when seniors cry their little hearts out. College application season. And I think definitely the question that was foremost on my mind, and I think a lot of people's minds when I was applying to colleges, is how can I get into one particular university? For me, that university that I really wanted to get into and poured my heart into learning about getting into was Columbia University. And so today I'm going to be sharing what I learned with you guys, and I really want to make this a video that has information that you're not going to just be able to get off of the Columbia website or a blog or other YouTube channels. This is everything that I learned and absorbed from my experience with applying, and it's just everything that I really would have loved to learn and to have a video on before I started the whole crazy process. So, without further ado, let's get into it. A little bit of backstory. I applied to Columbia with a GPA of 3.87 and an SAT score of 1560. So I hope that shows you right off the bat that you really don't need absolutely perfect stats or anything of the sort to get into Columbia or any other Ivy League or selective university. Columbia and any other college isn't looking for the well-rounded student who is absolutely ideal and excels in every single area. They want students who can create a well-rounded class by being really spiked, which means very much accomplished in one or two areas. And they want those students to come to their campus and offer the skills that they have built up and learned over their high school careers to Columbia. So, first things first, it is all about the packaging. So what that means is, the thing is, colleges can't come to your house and spend 24 hours a day with you 7 days a week. So you might tour the campus and speak to your regional admissions officer, and you might even have an interview at some point in the application process that lasts anywhere from half an hour to a couple of hours, and that's really the extent of any personal one-on-one time that you're going to get to bond with the college and the people who represent it. So all they really know about you is what you tell them, and when you're applying to a very selective university like Columbia, you want to make sure that everything you tell them both sets you off in your best light and contributes to a cohesive story of who you are as an applicant, which may differ somewhat from who you are as a person, but should still reflect the core of what you want to study, what you want to contribute to the world, and what you already have studied and contributed. So for me, I went to the Stanford University Online High School, and I had won some national awards for my novels and short stories and poetry, that kind of thing. And then also I had played piano since I was 5 and harp since I was 11, and I got to have a lot of really cool opportunities in high school just from playing a rare instrument. So that's what I really focused on in my Columbia application. That's what I crafted my story around, from the Common App portion and the essay to the lists of extracurricular activities and awards to the Columbia Writing Supplement. So I was packaging myself as this person who was really interested in academia and writing, especially creative writing, and also was a musician. So basically I was presenting myself as an artist. Obviously, I was applying to Columbia College and not the School of Engineering and Applied Sciences, or SEAS, and someone who's applying to the engineering school or to a different major than something like creative writing like I did would have to craft a different package on their application, but the core element of what that means remains the same. I've known people who applied to Columbia as history buffs or ballerinas or women in STEM, female coders, that kind of thing. And even as Slavic studies enthusiasts. So there's definitely no one package that fits each person, and to try and find some kind of holy grail of activities and courses and AP exams would be disingenuous, it wouldn't reflect who you are as a person. So my path will be different from yours, your path will be different from your best friends or your boyfriend or girlfriends or your little sibling or your big sibling. It's got to be unique to you. That's the only way that you can really come away from this process feeling like you've done everything you can, and at the same time putting your best foot forward when applying and giving yourself the best chance of getting accepted. So, for instance, I see myself as a businesswoman as much as I see myself as an artist, and at the same time as you're presenting yourself in this way, you don't have to include absolutely everything about yourself in the package that you craft. So I didn't really highlight those more entrepreneurial aspects of myself in my application, like I was starting my school and academic consulting businesses. I didn't really mention that because it just didn't fit in with this overarching storyline that I was creating of me as a writer and musician, even though these are also parts of who I am as a person, because who you are as a person is more than just an application, obviously. However, you don't want to come across as entirely one note, so you want to have a giant spike in one or two areas where you have these intense interests, and ideally you also have the grades and the scores and the outside awards and accolades to back up those interests, but at the same time, you want a few things in other areas to kind of demonstrate your versatility. So for me, that was foreign language because I had gone beyond the AP level in high school to study Spanish, and I had formed a really close relationship with my Spanish teacher who wrote one of my letters of recommendation and with whom I actually worked on sociolinguistic research, which we ended up submitting to a few different conferences, which was just an incredible experience, all of that. So very rewarding in and of itself, and also very useful for me to include on my application to show that I'm not just a writer and musician, I also have these strengths in other areas of interest. So I also had the test scores in Spanish for like the SAT subject test to back that up, and the grades. I had also danced ballet with a performing arts company of sorts in New Jersey, where I had lived for a really long time, and I included that on my application as well, even though I was never any sort of dancing prodigy or anything like that. I did have some really fun accomplishments and achievements with the group that looked good on paper, so I included that as kind of a side note as well, but it was really secondary to the writing and music. So when you are crafting this package and including your certain interests and aspects of your personality that you think really show you off in your best possible light, you want to be thinking about how Columbia is going to look at that. So Columbia needs to be able to nurture the passions of its students and the courses of study that they want to participate in. And if they can't do that, then it would be a disservice for them to accept a student that they can't nurture. So that brings me to my second tip, which is what out of the thousands of colleges in the world can you get out of Columbia and only Columbia that no other college can give you? Now, Columbia is an incredible opportunity for certain kinds of people. It's an Ivy League college with a dedicated liberal arts curriculum in one of, if not the most important cities in the known universe. If you're the kind of person who, say, wants to go into engineering but doesn't necessarily want to live their life in an exclusively STEM box, then Columbia might be the place for you. And if you're the kind of person who knows that they want to do internships in fashion or finance or anything else really besides, I don't know, the study of killer whale vocalizations, let's say, then you might be a good fit for Columbia. But there are a lot of colleges out there. There are a lot of colleges in New York City, and there are a lot of colleges in the United States and the world. So according to a statistic that I looked up right before filming this video, there are over 5,000 colleges in the United States alone. That's a lot of colleges. And each one was founded for a specific purpose and to reach and educate a specific type of student. So for any college, and I would argue especially for Columbia, you have to really sell them on why this is the place for you. And you can't just say it's because New York City, because everyone is going to say New York City. If you can convince them why Columbia and only Columbia is the place for you and can give you some really specific, granular opportunity, then you're golden. For me, I did this by cobbling together multiple different classes and extracurricular activities and things that I already knew I wanted to participate in at Columbia, and showing them in my application how they were the only university that could offer me all these opportunities in one place. So I showed them how I really wanted to major in creative writing, which isn't a rare major, but it's not exactly found at every single university ever, like, say, English or bio. So that was something that was incredibly important to me, and of course I backed it up with my classes and outside activities and awards. So one thing that I wrote that I felt at the time was really important to my application, and that I still think probably made a big impact, was that the summer before I had applied, I had attended the Telluride Association summer program, and I had attended a creative writing workshop there, and the subject of that workshop was the same as the theme of one of the Columbia creative writing classes. So the subject was trauma and memory in literature and narrative, which obviously is a pretty specific subject. So that was something that I felt could show Columbia, A, my dedication to getting to know them by just going through their website on such a deep level, and then B, that my interests, which I had already experienced and knew that I liked and wanted to keep pursuing, aligned pretty much exactly with what Columbia sees fit to teach its students. So, in a nutshell, I liked what they wanted their students to like. And then I also showed them that I was this dedicated musician, and I quoted my tour guide who had said that Columbia has a conservatory level music program, which had the added benefit, I think, of kind of reminding them, like, hey guys, I toured your campus, I really am dedicated to getting to know you and to applying to you. So Columbia doesn't track demonstrated interest like some other colleges, which means they're not keeping track of how many times you visit their campus or go to college fairs or open their emails, but it's still really important to show them that you aren't just applying on a whim and you really do appreciate and know about their college and their opportunities and offerings in a way that suggests that you took more than just a cursory glance at their website or something like that. So I also wrote a little bit about how I was looking forward to taking classes at the Columbia Ballet Collaborative, and how I had danced with the troupe and performed in some main roles in their Nutcracker performances. Dance wasn't even something that I necessarily highlighted on my application, it was just something that I enjoyed, and I included it to show how Columbia could nurture me even down to my hobbies, down to the things that I like to do in my spare time. So they had these opportunities for me in what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And then they even could give me places to have fun with the things that I just like to do as a kind of on the side. So every part of the person that I was presenting myself as in my package could be helped and supported by Columbia. And then we get to the flip side of the coin, right? So that's the third tip, or question, I guess, which is, what out of the thousands of students who apply can Columbia only get from you as an applicant? So I'd argue that Columbia and any college would gain a ton from having any one of you on their campus, and you all should know that, and you deserve everything, and acceptance to or rejection from one particular college is never going to determine that. But at the same time, like I said earlier, they just don't get to spend a whole lot of time with you outside of your application. So you have to make it as explicit as possible why they should pick you over someone else, or actually lots of someone else's. Telling them exactly why and how you would benefit from their programs and offerings, like I talked about with the last tip, is actually a really big part of this, because it's just so important that they know that they can give you a place where you're going to be benefited. So tips 2 and 3 really go hand in hand. If they know they can help you out, they're already going to be more receptive to accepting you, as opposed to if you say that you want to major in puppetry or learn the didgeridoo. Actually, come to think of it, Columbia might offer the didgeridoo. It is New York after all. So, speaking of New York, there are so many opportunities, but also so many people who are ready and willing and available to go after those opportunities, that you really have to show Columbia that you're the kind of person who is going to put yourself out there and pursue what you know that you like and want to do with your life. Columbia loves students who get involved with their communities in high school, whether it's by participating in the school musical every year, or running for student government, or leading a club, and even what you might think of more traditionally as like volunteer work, like community service. So this is because they want to accept people who are going to come to their campus next year and make an impact. It's even better if your community participation actually aligns with the areas of interest that you are purporting in your packaging. So for me, I had been the president of the literature club at my school for, I want to say 5 years by the time I applied, because my school goes from 7th to 12th grade, and I became president in 8th grade. So I had held that position for a really long time. And I was also the editor of the Lit Journal by being the president of that club. So I was able to fit that really seamlessly into my packaging that I talked about earlier, where I was this girl who was a writer, and not only was I a writer myself, but I was also working to provide avenues for my classmates who enjoyed writing to showcase their own work. So one classmate of mine introduced a whole new class to the school on designing your life, and another actually introduced a new board seat on student government to address student issues and concerns. And you definitely don't have to do anything quite that grandiose, but those are 2 examples of just how deeply you can delve into participating in your community if you so choose. My sister is an incredible artist, and she founded the art club at our school, which might be a more accessible way for some of you to get involved in your community. But the idea is you don't have to run yourself ragged by campaigning to get elected editor of the yearbook and student body president and founder of the, I don't know, Anthropological Birding Society or something like that. But if you do pick a couple of clubs and other organizations, things like that at your school that really align with what you're interested in, then that's an amazing way to get involved that Columbia will notice and appreciate. It's something that they're looking for. What's even better is if you create something with one of these clubs or organizations, like a whole new organization or a successful fundraiser or a monthly publication. You can get involved outside of school too. My town's library had a lot of different community service opportunities, so I participated in some of those, and it was just really fun and low-key. And then, and this is super important, you want to connect in your application your community participation to what you're going to do at Columbia or what you envision yourself doing. So I had played the harp in a lot of different youth and professional ensembles around New Jersey, and I noticed in the Columbia University Orchestra website the year that I was applying, they didn't have a harpist. They had had one in previous years, I knew because I had checked before, but that year under harpist it just said TBD. So I highlighted in my application how I could be an asset to them by playing harp in their ensembles. And of course, I had to back that up with my love of music and how I had won such and such awards and performed at such and such venues in NYC already, so they could see that if I were to come to their school, I would actually play in their ensemble. I wasn't just spitballing or trying to present myself as someone that I wasn't. I had already demonstrated this interest, so they could trust me to come to their school and make a difference in the areas that I like. So you guys are probably wondering how you're supposed to actually show all these interests and what you're going to do with them. So that's where the essay comes in, and that's where we also transition to my 4th tip, which is just use your essay to show the admission officer or officers that is or are reading it who you are as a person, and also to expand on aspects of your application and to tie it all together. So I don't know if any of you guys watched the show Silicon Valley on HBO, but there's this great segment where one of the characters is talking about how saying your name over and over again forces a potential assailant to recognize you as a human being. And I kind of see the college application essay in the same way. Obviously, you aren't going to be assailed by Columbia, but up until the moment that the admissions officers get to your essay, you've just been a collection of statistics on paper so far, right? So the essay, in a sense, forces them to acknowledge you as a human being. And trust me, it is so much harder to reject a human being than a pile of statistics. So honestly, I wouldn't call my Common App essay any kind of work of art or anything like that, but I do think that it represented who I was, who I am as a person. And I think that it did that in a way that can be kind of hard sometimes for people who are in high school and might not know exactly who we are just yet. So I've read a lot of my peers' essays. I've read essays for people I work with. I've read essays in books with titles like 50 Best College Application Essays and I don't know, that kind of thing. So the point is, I've read way more college application essays than any sane person ever should. And when it comes down to it, the essay is really what defines the college application experience in a way. Based on a ton of the essays I've read, there seems to be this idea that you have to come across as like the consummate academic, that you have to impress your reader in some way. I promise you don't have to try and impress anyone. You just have to tell your story. It doesn't have to be wildly tragic or inspirational, and it doesn't have to be about how you climbed Mount Everest or overcame cancer or some other really large and grandiose time in your life. If you have had an experience like that and you choose to write about it, that's fantastic. More power to you. But I hope you guys know that you don't have to. Your essay can be about something that is objectively really, really tiny and small and maybe doesn't seem that big in the grand scheme of things, but if it had meaning for you, that's all that matters. I remember a few years back there was an essay making the rounds on the internet about a girl's experience at Costco, and one of my classmates wrote an essay about seeing a bird of paradise land in her backyard and just the meaning that moment had for her. I guess the key takeaway here is whatever event or life story you choose to draw from to inform your essay, so long as it holds meaning for you, that's all that matters. Obviously, you want to make sure that you're able to convey that meaning to others in a way that is comprehensible and you're not just shouting into the void. So have an English teacher or someone you trust with a really strong grasp of grammar look over your essay. And if you can, try to consider your essay's style as well as its substance. So that's asking yourself questions like, where is the most important word in each sentence located? And if you change the structure of a paragraph, does it have more or less impact? Oh, and what happens if you move this adverbial clause from the beginning of a sentence to the end? And please, whatever you do, please, please, please don't feel obligated to write a traditional 5-paragraph essay with a clearly defined thesis statement and topic sentences at the start of each paragraph and a conclusion that restates the introduction. You guys know what I'm talking about. And the idea is you can be casual here. You don't want to use a lot of slang, and you don't want to fall and prey to the assumption that your readers know about every single subculture that you like to hang out in, but this isn't the time to be incredibly formal, so let them get to know you. Have someone you know and trust read your essay, and have someone you don't know read the essay. Take people's suggestions, but don't take them to heart unless you feel like they enhance your own unique individual voice and perspective. Okay, so finally we come to the final tip. Number 5, I think. Yes, number 5. Spend time on the Columbia supplement, but don't try to psychologically overanalyze it. I know a lot of people who are applying to the other Ivy League colleges, as well as smaller liberal arts colleges and state schools, and it was rare that I personally heard anyone angst over a writing supplement as much as people, myself included, angsted over the Columbia supplement. And understandably so, it asks a lot of questions that sometimes seem specifically constructed to get you to question every one of your pursuits and interests and desires from the entire last year. But fear not. Just like with the Common App essay, the Columbia supplement really requires you to be yourself. That's the best way to go. I swear. I've seen people write down John Green novels for the question that asks you about the books that you've read for pleasure over the past year and get accepted, and I myself wrote more than a few young adult fantasy titles. Columbia spends a lot of time trying to get to know what you're interested in so far as literature and information and the arts, and if you didn't spend the last year reading Kant and Nietzsche and attending scholarly lectures every other week, you might feel screwed. Please don't. I wrote that I saw Hamilton for one of the shows, lectures, and exhibitions that I had attended. I think for these questions where it asks you to list names of readings or other things, it's best to have a combination of your more scholarly academic pursuits. I wrote down a ton of books of poetry, and then also what you might do for kind of lighter fare, just for fun or casual hangouts or something like that. Here is also a great place to add in a little scattering of variety where it won't overwhelm what you've chosen as your main hook, your package, but at the same time it will show that you are a multifaceted person. For instance, I chose to weave a thread through these questions of me being someone who's interested in feminism and the politics of colonization, just through some of the required and non-required readings I had read, as well as the publications and websites I peruse regularly. It can also be helpful to organize the way that you make your lists. I didn't use any numbers or anything like that because, pro tip, that can add to your overall word count, but I did make different clusters based on the interest or theme that each cluster represented. So, like in the regular publications question, I had a cluster for literary journals, and then a cluster for feminist publications, and finally a cluster for politics and news sources. They're going to want to know where you get your news from. It doesn't all have to be like the Wall Street Journal or Business Insider, the New York Times, or really serious and stoic publications like that. Like, I put The Onion in addition to some of the more serious ones. So, let them get to know you, but also make sure that they understand that you are keeping up with current events, that you are an engaged citizen and member of this country. That's another thing that Columbia does tend to keep an eye out for. Obviously, though, the supplement is more than just the lists. It also has the pretty standard why Columbia question, as well as what you value in a college community and why you're interested in the majors that you've listed. I've already touched on being specific here, more so than just saying that you like New York City or the core or something like that. And continuing on that thread, something you might say is you can describe how maybe when you toured the campus, you sat in on a certain professor's class and were so inspired that you went home and read all the publications that professor had authored, and how you cannot wait to get to the campus next year and start studying with that professor, maybe even work with them on research in undergrad or something like that. Just something incredibly specific and niche that no one else but you is going to say. And for the majors question, treating that like a miniature version of the Common App is, I think, your best bet, and that you really want to tell your story. And don't be afraid to share some of your humor if that's something that you feel is right for you. I know I definitely did, and it worked for me. So pass it by multiple people first to make sure that the humor comes through if you choose to go that route, but don't hesitate to be funny. Alternatively, if you have a more solemn reason why you want to pursue your field, like maybe you want to go into medicine because of a family member's disease or something along those lines, be sure to make that story your own. Even the best sob stories can feel generic if you aren't making your audience understand how you felt and how that was specific to you. So make them feel whatever you went through. Get them invested in your journey. That's the very best you can possibly do. So I hope that this was useful for you guys, and I just want you to know, please treat yourselves with kindness during this whole journey. Applying to colleges is incredibly stressful. Getting acceptance and rejection letters from colleges is incredibly stressful. It is such a hard time. It might even be one of the hardest times that you've gone through in your adolescence, and colleges can always be unpredictable. It's always impossible to know exactly what kind of a class they're looking for, if they need a bassoonist or a rower or something like that. I don't know sports terminology, but the idea is they might accept or reject someone who in any other year they would have given the opposite decision to. So it's always unpredictable, but you can give yourself the best possible chance, and I hope that these tips help you do just that. And if you liked this video, then you can check the description for links to academic consulting or my school, and please subscribe to the channel and like the video if you did indeed like it, and share if you want to with your friends and family. I really want as many people as possible to be able to benefit from these tips, so if you feel like you did, get the word out there. And let me know down in the comments what your favorite tip so far from this video, or just from your experiences, has been with getting accepted to college or with applying to college if you haven't gotten there yet. And let me know what else you want to know about the college application process. I'm happy to share my own really specific journey, what I did exactly, kind of step by step. I'm happy to talk about acceptances and applications to some of the more famous summer programs that I did, like the Telluride Association summer program. Happy to talk about music or creative writing, anything you guys want to know, just so long as you let me know. So, hope to see you guys again really soon. And hopefully, like I said, this was helpful. So